Ultimo Sathanas cras rex restitio altere.
Almighty Satan, great ruler of the universe.
Edit al strenium bupidis lerie untu bistitio.
Foot upon thy throne, and eye of the serpent ever seeing.
Castio upi est nubio des lels unsano, et vio respusio con sapiae.
Cast upon us now thy light and wisdom as we intertwine with thee.
Un maduo rexiore ine con nutrexio parasta vivio tamande elechuet, excelsior Sathanas.
And may your kingdom reign with never-ending praise as we all say,
Hail,
Satan. We three servants, thy intertwined priests, come to thy throne. May those that are yours only hear thy voice. Ave Sathanas.
Ave Sathanas.
Welcome to this episode. We dedicate this show to Father Mark
and to Aleister, Christopher, Simijes, and to Frater Wolfhoek.
And to the Magnum Opus Satanic Coven, to her members, affiliates, supporters, Soro Rudiale Lucera Tevel, Soro Nimbril, and to the select others who have been contributing towards this great work.
Thank you to all of our listeners for being here.
To our studio audience, welcome this evening. This is Malthorpe Draco coming to you from Studio 3B, and this is Night Sessions. We have a special show for you tonight, and back with us again is our co-host Magus Cygnus Atratus, and of course, Magus Aleister Nacht. Aleister, tell us about the focus of our show.
Thanks, Malthorpe. Tonight, we're going to delve into the communication of faith and when a person should provide help to others who are searching for their way on the path within our journey. We'll talk about why things are held occult, what that means, and what it means to be in ministry and being a voice for Sathanas. As a reminder to everyone, we're approaching this segment as we have approached others. These are our opinions. Rarely does Satanism have one size fits all. You are the one who, along with Sathanas, determines your own destiny, and only you can choose when things should remain occult. Take all of what we present here, evaluate it. If you find something of value, use it as your own, but put the rest away for another day. We will end the discussion with some tips for your journey. So that's what our show is about tonight. We'll try to get all of this done in one dark evening, but before we go there, let's go to the one who brought us all here. Father, bless our listeners and provide the gnosis for these words to become knowledge. Deliver your message to our satanic community and provide comfort and rejuvenate the spirit of our brothers and sisters worldwide. So mote it be. Before I ask how everyone is doing tonight, I want to share some news about our fellow priest and brother, Cygnus Atratus. He is now a new magus in Magnum Opus. Congratulations, Cygnus.
Thank you, Magus Aleister. Thank you, Father Maldraco. Thank you so much.
That is great. He has put a lot of work and a lot of energy and study and thought into this journey to become magus. And we are very proud of him and proud of the work that he is doing for the Satanic Kingdom. Malthorpe, back to you for our questions.
Thank you very much, my Magus. And also, just Sig, I welcome you to this new role and this new responsibility. I think this is going to be great for you. And I know it was a tremendous amount of work took over a year of investment of time. But I think really spiritually for you, you've been on that journey for a long time. And I think that year was just a recognition of that lifelong journey. So congrats.
Thank you so much, Father Mal Draco. And I just want to, if I may add briefly to that, for the listeners here today, having moved to this degree hasn't just been a paper on the wall or a button on a jacket. It really, you get what you put into it, as with anything really in life. And if you're sincere, I believe, and intentful and understanding these deeper satanic mysteries, and you come before Sathanas and he accepts you and you accept him, I believe that whatever each and every one of us put into this process, you will receive. And where you are supposed to be is where you are supposed to be. Prior to the Magus degree, the journey began years ago, like Brother Maldraco said, years ago. And it began with that curiosity of wanting to know more, and the curiosity to the next step, and then to the next step, and to the next step. So just follow those breadcrumbs that lead you back home. So my heartfelt gratitude to you both. I'm indebted. My gratitude to Sathanas. I'm humbled by this experience. And believe it or not, in the magnum opus, as Magus Aleister, you've taught us, this is a responsibility for service. Really, it's not about toting and going, "Oh, I'm a Magus." No, it's about responsibility of service to the infernal kingdom, and pushing this forth. So, in fact, I'm grateful for this opportunity to Sathanas. In fact, I'm humbled because I feel so much more in touch with my own humanity and accepting of it as well. So, Ave Sathanas.
Ave Sathanas. So let's delve into the reason we're gathered here today, and start with our questions on the show. Let's talk for a second about, why are things held occult? What's the purpose of that? And is it still relevant today? Aleister, let's go to you first. If you would explain to our novices what the word occult means.
Well, the word actually comes from the Latin of occultus, meaning clandestine, hidden, or secret. Basically, to hide or obscure from others. It started out basically referring to astrology and alchemical processes and magical beliefs and practices, holding certain things hidden from the public. It's taken to mean knowledge that is basically meant only for certain people, and we certainly utilize that as it's defined in our practice. The word developed a practical meaning because of the persecution experienced in the 19th century France. Practitioners of what was occultism just coming into being. Also throughout history, regimes of power, authoritarian and totalitarianism and things like that throughout modern history have caused not only our beliefs and works to go underground at times, but also those of other beliefs within the left-hand path as well. And even events in current history today, modern history, may be pouring a foundation for modern persecution of those on the left-hand path. I'm always amazed when people invite different institutionalizations that take away people's rights in exchange for giving them something, giving them housing or money or what have you, basically what we interpret as communism or what have you. But it's very important to point out that usually people like us are the first ones that are sent to the prisons and gulags, or just lined up and shot for our beliefs.
So, Aleister, you lived through the great Satanic Panic of the 1980s. Any thoughts about that, and how bad was it?
It was really bad. It was really scary back in the 80s. And this is something that most listeners may not be able to really relate to, but I know in the South, in Louisiana, where I grew up, it was not uncommon for someone to be attacked, not verbally attacked, but attacked with baseball bats or stabbed or shot. People really had to even go to like these small occult bookstores in New Orleans, you had to really look over your shoulder, because if you were seen coming out of one of those places by the wrong people, you might have people that would follow you home and burn your house down, or, assault you in other ways. So it was very, very real. And that's why I'm so shocked today when people want to embrace these different cultures and the culture war and what I can only describe as the very, very far left and far right. It works the same way. And those were scary times in the 80s. If you have never gone through it, I equate it to talking with someone that left Cuba. Ask them how they feel about communism and see what their thoughts are. It was the same type feeling. It was a feeling of fear. There was no way that a practitioner of devil worship could come out to anyone, even those people that you might think were on your side or wanted to learn. You had to be careful. There were a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing that would let you talk your way into something, and a lot of people lost their lives. A lot of people suffered at the hands of radicals, Christian radicals. It's very scary, and what I'm seeing today is very scary as well.
And of course, we're going to talk about the balance tonight, about not being fearful in terms of departure from Satan, or saying, hey, it's just not worth the risk. But we'll talk about that in just a few. So, Siggy, how about for you? What do you think about when we talk about things like being held occult or hidden?
First I want to, add that everything Magus Aleister said is spot on. And my heart goes out and to folks that are, to this day as we speak, suffering from this type of extremism and violence for their beliefs. Regular folks that aren't hurting anyone, just living their lives, and they're feeling this persecution and they're getting attacked. Their lives are being threatened. As we speak, there's places all around the world. And just the other day, there was a very kind individual from East Asia who joined as well, sharing her experience with being a Satanist and having to really hide and protect herself, and I felt her fear. So I just want to say that that's still going on to this day. And although in the States, there to a certain extent we have experienced that, it's probably worse in other places, but it's a very real thing and it's very unfortunate. At the end of the day, even when you demystify everything, like, hey, just live and let live, right? We're all, let's just, as long as you're hurting nobody, and why just do you and mind our own business. And so my heart goes out to all of that. And may Sathanas bless those that he's calling and protect them. And if you're hearing this, and you're guarded, you're watched over, and Sathanas will guide you. But also utilize these cognitive skill sets that we're going to talk about in this show today. And be strategic and be prudent, and use your eye of discernment and wisdom to make the right choices, to be selective, who you let in close and who you don't. Some people in some relationships and situations, we need to keep at an arm distance away. Others, we can keep them closer. And that's the ultimate decision, I think, in the modern day, as to what we determine to be occult, hidden, or not. Who do we choose to share or to reveal this secret part of us, this secret knowledge of us? I would say that in the old days, this concept of, as we understand it also in Sathanetics, that there's concepts of the esoteric that are understood by a select folks with a specialized knowledge in this esotericism, with the said purpose of bringing the spirit, the mind, and the body in alignment with the non-physical beyond the veil, quote unquote, Sathanetics, as taught by the Magnum Opus. So, and that's traditionally, that's how it is. So, but let's kind of demystify it for a second. Not everyone's called to be a medical doctor. And medical schools are very select with who they receive in their admission process. It's very competitive. You have to have a certain score on a test, and you have to have a certain aptitude with academic and mathematics or science, biology. So there's always a screening process in any type of organization or whatnot, and in a university setting. And so the occult is essentially a formatory process. It's an educational process that was an ancient one at a time where universities weren't accessible for those that were interested. Not everyone's interested in learning more. I mean, look at today. Does everyone go to college? No. Some people go to trade schools. Some people want to work at a different job that doesn't require them to go on. Some people go because they love it. Other people go for different reasons. We forget that the occult existed in a world where there was no access to information altogether. There was illiteracy, all rampant. The only folks that could read were generally the rich. Books were written by the Catholic Church and the monks. These were the printing presses, and there was no access to information. The plebeians, the village people, could not read or were not allowed to read the Bible. They had no access to that text. This is why when you go all throughout Europe, there's paintings on walls, because that is how they conveyed the story to the farmers, to the peasants, to the pagans. Because even the word pagan really means person of the earth, farmer, village person. So, but why is now pagan, the word pagan, demonized? Over the years, it's been demonized. It become a class. It was a class issue, and now it's become an issue of demonizing folks of different beliefs. Just because you share a different belief, we're going to demonize you. We're going to slander you. We're going to character assassinate you. We're going to accuse you of atrocities, damage your credibility, ostracize you from society, excommunicate you from any validity of any worth or recognition. So, I mean, this is a herd type of, or perhaps intentional type of tactic that's used all the time, and it's a sign of the unintelligent. Anytime you have no basis of any argument, you immediately just start character assassinating people. That's a low blow. That really means that you have nothing really to say. And this is where I would say this is where we're non-dogmatic. If we claim to be the left-hand path, we cannot replicate those behaviors. So therefore, we cannot be non-dogmatic. We need to be the complete opposite. We need to be open, inclusive, tolerant, understanding, live, and let people have a difference of opinions, because that's all it is. Because what Aleister's saying is that there are people out there that potentially could kill me simply because I'm a philosophical rebel, simply because I crack open a book. Because magic is a matter of spirituality. There's skeptics, there's naysayers. It's whether you believe it or you don't. If you ask an atheist, it's all hoax. But the point of the story is someone out there is willing to kill me because I decided to, instead of watching the Kardashians, to sit in silence and to hail my maker. Is that really at the end of the day something evil? No. So all of this is a mass hysteria, and I think it's prudent to be very discerning on who you share what you do with. Sometimes when you're in the earlier phases of the path, you feel very called to speak your truth. Well, sometimes that then later changes and you realize that it might be in your best interest to be like a ninja or like a serpent, to just slither through and to be very selective. And I think that's a prudent thing to do.
Yeah, thank you, Sig. So back to you for a follow-up question. I know you faced some persecution in your past. Did that experience make you feel like you needed to close inward for a period? How did you deal with that energy, and what was your ultimate focus, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I would say that, basic psychology teaches us a concept that when people are confronted with what they perceive or interpret to be life or death situations, we either run, we freeze, or we fight. Generally speaking, we can't clump everybody into those three basic primal responses, but more or less to some degree or another, we freeze, we run, or we fight. And how we respond to conflict, and whether we're being threatened or other types of conflict in our life, and how we respond, it's largely dependent on your self-awareness. If you recognize or realize what you're doing, to give you the opportunity to choose to do otherwise. It's contingent on your own personality, what you feel called to do. For example, if one person might feel the need to revert, or to be more of the quiet type, to seclude, to find their safe space. Others might be ready to fight. I mean, there are and these are maybe the warrior type of personality types that will respond back, fire with fire, so to speak. Now, obviously, I've gone through this just like everyone else in one degree or another. And esoterically speaking, I would say that this path actually requires the individual to go through a certain number of tests and trials. And specifically as it relates to being persecuted, ostracized, scapegoated, and in experiencing, and what I say is to feel like to be the outsider, to know what it feels like to be the outsider. This is the left-hand path. We are the outsider spiritual traditions. And there's other left-hand path traditions, as with the Agori of the Hindu sects, that also have experienced that for the last 2,000 years. They are the outsiders of their culture, so to speak. So personally, I believe that this is actually designed specifically for initiates of this path to undergo, to a certain extent, at some point, usually early on the path, as they relate to family, as they begin to relate with friends, or in the workplace, as they begin to step into their power, into their spiritual power as theistic practitioners. And so this is done so also so we can fully understand and see the hidden implications of this path in the tradition and really the egregore. And so it's understandable, though, that many people experience resistance, conflict, and difficulties in regard to this. And we might find ourselves going in and out, struggling with our own cognitive dissonance in our own mind. What am I doing is right? Is this really me? Do I really want? Or struggling with the opinions of others, our partners. Why are you doing that? Or that's devil, that's evil. So there's a lot of this you're expected to go through. But I intently believe this is also part of the path. At the end of the day, emotional resilience is extremely important in this path. It's not about codependency or being vulnerable and being a doormat to anybody. It's about stepping into your power and really truly developing emotional resiliency on a higher plane that just speaks to your true spiritual freedom.
Yeah, thorough as always, my friend. Aleister, you've been our chief magus, and you yourself have had a very public ministry. Before I get into this next question, I just want to go back to what you said at the very beginning, because I thought that was just an incredible, off the top of your head, purging of your thoughts about what happened back in the 1980s and talking about your very visual concerns about what happened in that period. We're called to be bold in this in this life that we've stepped into and move forward with. What are your thoughts about those that are scared or concerned about what might happen in the future with the culture wars? What are your thoughts about stick-to-itiveness, the importance of living your commitment, making sure that you're following through with being bold in your satanic beliefs? What are your thoughts about that balance?
It certainly deserves some thought as far as the individual. In my walk and in my life, I've always had the less is more philosophy, and that has always served me well. I'm bold when people ask questions and honestly seeking answers, and I will stand my ground. But I learned many, many years ago, there are certain things that are worth falling on your sword about, and there are some things that you just need to leave alone and go your own way. And that philosophy has served me very, very well over the years. And I think each person has to do a self-evaluation of that. How much do they want to reveal, and how soon do they want to reveal it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you well said. So let me just do a follow-up here. And you yourself have had a very public ministry for many, many years. You lived through the last era of Satanic Panic, and you not only survived it, but you excelled and you continue to keep focus on your true beliefs. But what's a good guide? When should we hold things occult, and when should we be bold and go forth?
Well, I believe there's a time and a place for everything. And I think sometimes that itself can be a little confusing to those who are new to the path. When a person finds Sathanas and they find theistic Satanism, many times they are very excited and they want to tell someone. It's just like anything good that happens. You want to share that. with your friends or your family or what have you, even social media. But sometimes what happens is your audience is not prepared to receive that information. And so I find that many people that I come in contact with have prematurely come out of the witch's closet, so to speak. And they find themselves subjected to questions and even ridicule that they're simply not prepared to deal with at that point. They haven't been on the path long enough. And so trying to defend against certain concepts or answer certain questions basically ends up a losing proposition for that individual. A person's belief is personal. And I want to point that out. First of all, it's not for public consumption. And again, as I said earlier, coming into the left-hand path, hoodoo is benign, and, people think that it's more of a white magic. Back in the 80s, any kind of magical belief, even paganism itself, was seen as being you're an arch enemy of established religion. Therefore, you have a target on you. You're open for attack, ridicule, even physical attack. So what I had to do is I come from a different background. I come from a different age. Today, it's so easy for people to go on social media and they can say, I'm a Satanist, I'm this, I'm that. It's no big deal. I have a lot of friends who dealt with coming out as gay in the past. And it was not because they weren't proud, but this is before pride. This is when that would get you hurt in the deep South. Not canceled on social media. I'm talking about really hurt. And it was the same thing for the left-hand path. And so I think there is a time to assert when people ask questions, when you're comfortable with the audience, I think is paramount. And also don't forget, Sathanas provides guidance and discernment, and you can always go to him, and I advise you to do that beforehand. Let him guide you and guide your walk, and also guide who you reveal things to, because he will bring people into your path that are truly searching. They're looking for Sathanas, and you can be there and you can help facilitate that. But understand that coming out of the witch's closet, so to speak, in front of the wrong crowd, in front of the wrong people, it can still be a detriment. So if you have a family and you have children, you have a mortgage and you have a job, these are things that can ruin and actually harm not only yourself, but others like your children, and cause you to lose your job. I mean, these are still very real challenges that are faced by the left-hand path, up to and including physical assault. So my advice is always go to Sathanas first, and then make sure you're comfortable with the audience. And that takes time to develop that confidence and that trust. And without that, there's no need to reveal your hand. When you come to that realization that you are a Satanist, a devil worshiper, and you find that relationship with Sathanas, again, you want to shout it from the rooftops because of the joy that it brings and how it makes everything new. But just know that that is something that your friends, your family, your neighbors may not be ready for, nor may they be accepting of your newly found inspiration.
Yeah, spot on. Aleister, as always. So, Sig, how about for you? Any additional thoughts from you on the statement I posed to Aleister?
You know, I think Magus is spot on, and what he mentioned is a key point. I just would like to reemphasize is that personal relationship with Sathanas. Go to Sathanas, discern for yourself, because there's so many situations, contexts, individuals. What is your truth? And sometimes we feel that we have to speak. Sometimes we determine it's our true will is more aligned and just continuing on and paying no mind. Certainly wasting energy and aggravating yourself for really just needlessly. It's a waste of time and waste of your energy. And so there's really no constructive. There's many situations with folks where more often than not, it's just not a constructive opportunity to push the kingdom forward in any way. It doesn't help you, doesn't help Sathanas, and it's a moot point. Has nothing to do really with what Sathanas wants you to do in your life. Because I get that question sometimes from folks. They're like, oh, I'm experiencing this at work, and is it bad of me? Will Sathanas be mad at me if I don't speak my mind to my boss and let them know that, theistic Satanism, we're all not bad people, and this is a legit faith? And I think in this respect, my response was, is it really, do you feel cold? Number one, is that really what you feel, Sathanas? No, but I'm just upset because, well, that's different. Then it becomes more of like a interpersonal type of dynamic. And perhaps you could save yourself the aggravation because, like Aleister said, so it's, and we don't waste time either. Our job is not to convert. Sathanas might not be calling them, so there's no need to even say anything. Just go about your business and strategize, think critically, and make advancements in your own dominion, and be effective where you allocate your energy. Because as magicians, energy is everything. If your energy is dispersed in too many places, that'll affect also your outcomes. So, prioritize what's really important for you and discern.
Thanks, Magus. Trottis, great observation there. It sounds good saying that, by the way. So I want to take us through a couple of situations that are actual real-life scenarios that are affecting some of our listeners. Aleister, we're going to start with you, but we will discuss each situation as a roundtable. So the first situation is this. We have two partners who've had a long-term relationship. One of the partners is without, and when I say that, of course, I mean without the knowledge or understanding of Satan or satanic worship. And then one of the partners is clearly beginning his or her practice. Aleister, is there an obligation to share with the other partner? Partnerships are an important thing, and communication in partnerships are important. What's the advice and counsel here?
It goes back to the old English proverb, birds of a feather flock together. And I think there's always a longing to share and be accepted as is, but ultimately that's the individual's choice. Sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes it's very tedious to broach the subject of personal belief. In a relationship, I think it increases the dynamic of the relationship. It causes strain in some cases, and it may ultimately lead to a dissolution of the relationship. But I think patience and time, the give and take of the relationship helps. And over time, just being open and honest and having that discussion with love and mutual respect, I think is very beneficial. But I think the timing is important in the fact that there may be a more advantageous time to do that. Some people subscribe to being very open up front. And, I can see that, but I also see forming some kind of relationship with a person before you lay all of that on them. Certainly the first date is maybe not the best time to come forward with all of your beliefs. But ultimately, if you are not equally yoked, and if you do not share just some basic philosophical beliefs, then your relationship is probably not going to make it, because there are going to be too many differences. And what's going to happen is if you hold back over time, you're going to build up anger and resentment with yourself and to that person because you feel like that they have put you in a prison where you can't be truthful with who you are. Again, every situation is going to be different, and each one you have to measure with a modicum of compassion and love, but ultimately you have to be truthful with yourself. It's a satanic principle. We take care of ourselves. Then we take care of anyone else around us. And we may love and we may care for someone, but we have to be healthy physically and mentally and emotionally before we can be of any service or we can be in a productive, healthy relationship.
Wow, that was incredible, Aleister, and I'll speak to some of that in a minute with some examples within my own life. But Sig, let's go to you next. And how about for you? Any thoughts about this situation?
Aleister's right on point. Timing is very important. I wouldn't recommend. I think that's kind of funny, actually. With the first date going on a person, if they're really distinctly different in their own personal beliefs, to say, hi, I'm Bob, and I'm a Satanist. That might have the partner leaving you there at the dinner table. So be prudent when you tell them. Another thing that comes to mind is values. It's very important. Typically speaking, in any relationship, values are important. And this is when people come together, whether it's in a larger setting like here today amongst the three of us or as a couple, and on a common purpose with a common aim. And so relationships are no different. So there has to be a common understanding. Like I also mentioned a key term there, compassion, effective communication with each other. And every relationship's unique. And knowing who you are, the lifestyle that you want to live, and how you wish to live according to your values and your truths. Because spirituality and theistic Satanism, like any other, speaks to really core values most of the time on a really deep level. And if you, like Aleister mentioned, feel that you're being restricted from expressing who you really are, that does creep up on you with time. And it could end up with you feeling upset, angry, frustrated, or with other misunderstandings or passive aggressive things that might happen. It's a personal thing, how you really want to choose to live your life according to those values and truths. So, and that requires a hard reflection, because you really have to look at yourself and ask yourself, is this where I want to be? And sometimes some relationships part when you make certain decisions. I use the analogy of a river. Sometimes rivers part. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes the time is now for the rivers to part. But I'm not anyone nor anyone else really to tell you that. That's really something you have to come for yourself to decide for yourself. But at the end of the day, you have to be free to be who you are. And if you're with someone very intimately, I would say, generally speaking, it would be very nice that both of you accept each other for who you are without trying to change each other. So mutual acceptance, and that's really key, is acceptance, of who you are. And that's a beautiful feeling if you have that. And I would love to see more of that.
That's a great point. So many people get into relationships with the idea that they're going to change the other person. And it turns more from a relationship of acceptance and love without condition to being, well, this person is going to change. And when they don't change, then it becomes a huge problem. I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, so for my own walk, it really kind of crosses what the two of you have said, and that is, I had this one situation. I was dating this guy, and I was really into him. He had walked many paths within the Wiccan world, and so he was definitely left-hand path. About 3 months into the relationship, I was praying to Satan, I'm going to share this. I actually had said a couple of prayers over him at different points in our relationship, particularly when, things had gotten very intimate. And I thought, there's going to be understanding here, because there's a commonality of path. He'll understand, he'll get it, he'll accept it. I mentioned it to him, and like literally the response and the look on his face was so visceral. It was so lack of understanding, so repulsed by the even consideration that Satan would be a being to be followed. And, for me, I went from 150% into the relationship to zero in 2 seconds, because a relationship for me without Satan is a dead relationship. And so I made it very clear to him that, things were over. He was pretty bitter about it. This guy was, was really into me, and I was into him. But I didn't see him again for about a year. And the next time I saw him, he said, "I want you to know I just have spent a year in counseling." And I said, "Man, I'm sorry for that, but clearly that's not a thing we can ever talk about again." And we agreed. I haven't seen him since then, but from that time, I came to know a person who had no experience in left-hand path, no occult experience, no paganistic. He's a hedonist, but he's definitely not followed any type of a pathway. At the very beginning of the relationship, as things got started, I said, "I need to tell you something, and I'm taking a risk here." And of course, he thought it was cancer. Like, I'm about to tell him that I'm dying and I have this life-threatening disease. And I'm like, "No, I need to let you know that I follow a pathway. It's not a common pathway for most people, but I'm a Satanist, and I want you to know that that's important to me, and it has a place in my life that I will not depart from." He was very accepting. He had some questions. I answered the questions carefully, not trying to present too much information that needed to be kept occult. But also, I felt very, very, at the very beginning, I felt like, you know what? This is not going to be his pathway. I'm going to be accepting of that. I'm going to let that go as a demand or a desire, because, we don't try to convert people. That was 4 years ago. And he's been very accepting of my time away and my time in the temple. And the only thing he ever is frustrated about is how much time I like to spend there. But beyond that, it's not become an issue, and it's never become a difference between us. I will pick up on this though. What Aleister said about being unequally yoked, that's something in the Xian world, but it's also something in our world. That is an important, important principle. If you can be yoked with a fellow Satanist, that should be your priority and your commitment, because it's so much a part of who you are. The ability to practice that together, male or female, is significant. It's the only thing I ever miss. But at this point in my relationship, it's not something I'm going to demand for. So that's been my experience in my walk, and I enjoyed the opportunity to share here.
That's wonderful, Malthor. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Brother Mal. And because that's a blessing from Sathanas, because it is possible to have a nice relationship with someone. Maybe they're not a full-blown Satanist, but they're accepting and they're okay with it. And that's okay too. We don't have to have the same exact beliefs with our partners, because, like Aleister mentioned many times, though, sometimes partners want to change the other partner, not just with spiritual religion, but a lot of other things. So, good communication at the right time is important. I like to do that usually early on. And then that way they can't say, "Well, you didn't tell me," when I actually did. But that's just me, and every situation is different. And I certainly hope for the listeners that you may have a healthy, blessed relationship where you can bring your devotion without fear of being criticized or having to hide in your own home, your altar, or your journal, your grimoire, because you're afraid your partner is going to find it and that's going to turn into a fight. Because I know there's people out there that are in those situations, and there's no judgment. My heart goes out to you. May Sathanas bless you, and may the doors continue to open for you.
Yeah, I think that's right, Sig. And I think, one point beyond that maybe we need to make clear, and that is, this is a part of your walk with Satan. You have to decide, are you going to apologize for the faith, or are you going to walk boldly forward and not ask for permission? And I had to get to a point where I'm not asking for permission. And frankly, the first partner example gave me that ability, because that visceral reaction made me realize what's important to me. And if he's so important to me, then I've got to be willing to say, I'm not going to give up on my practice. I'm not going to give up on the focus of who he is. And I got to move forward. And so that helps set the example for the second scenario of the relationship that ended up in a good place. So Sig, let me go ahead and move on to the second situation, and let's start with you. So a neighbor comes into your home and he sees an occult book, which I know you well enough. You've got them there. So they see an occult book on Satanism on your bookshelf, and he asks you, "Hey, tell me what this is all about." So how would you respond to that? And what's your obligation? Is it your obligation to tell that person more about Satan, or is your obligation, at a different point or focus?
It's different with every encounter, and I say develop satanic wisdom, and ask Sathanas when you're before your altar to grant you the gift of satanic wisdom. That's number one. That's very important. With every encounter with different people, you will discern and feel intuitively, or you'll be guided as to what will be appropriate for that scenario. And sometimes you will feel not with this one, or sometimes you'll feel, well, you could share a little bit, and you'll feel that to a certain extent when you develop your intuition, your psychic sense. And if you ask for Sathanas to bless you with satanic wisdom, that eye of discernment, the devil's eye, I would like to say, becomes more developed. Now, I actually had a similar situation like this happen. A colleague from the workplace was going through a hard time. And in one of our episodes, we talked about compassion and how it's a misunderstanding that we can't be compassionate. Quite to the contrary, I'm very compassionate. Now, I'm not a doormat for anybody. Let me make that very clear. But I'm selectively very compassionate, especially like for you, my brothers here, who deserve and have earned my respect. I tip my hat to you. So I will give the shirt off my back for my brothers and sisters in my coven, because that's a loyalty. And that's a loyalty that's very important, I would say, in the coven setting, especially, in the tradition that we speak of, as I experience it and as I see it, the value of your word and the value of loyalty. Now, I did have a colleague who was struggling because, believe it or not, he was a Christian and very, 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 very religious. But we actually got along great at the workplace. We didn't really get into any much, Bible talk or debates, but we used to shoot the shit, like the people say, right? And he was all right, but he was very hardcore Christian. I wasn't oblivious to that. And neither was he oblivious to the fact that I probably was inclined to a lot of things that he didn't really understand too much about, and that he probably would be very judgmental of. But nonetheless, he got kicked to the curb by his Christian wife also. Christian wife kicked him to the curb. The guy had nowhere to go. And we got along great, and I felt bad for the guy. So I was like, you know what? You can crash on my couch for a little bit. No problem. And very well aware that, he's probably going to see my occult library and my stack of tarot cards and all sorts of goodies I have dangling all over the place. But you know what? I'm there to do him a favor. He's in my house right now, in my kingdom, right? So if he's all right with it, that's his call. But I'm happy to extend a hand of assistance, because as far as I'm concerned, this is a theology for a select few that Sathanas calls, and he doesn't call everyone. He calls the cream of the crop, I like to say. Those who are called. You were probably born to do this. You've probably done this for past lives. You've come here to do this again. So this is a very select tradition, I would say. However, there's teachings, I believe, that are applicable for all people, and I think that's a very empowering thing. But in this case, he did see those books. He did see my Devil's Tarot, and he did see my inverted cross hanging around my neck, and came up and asked me, hey, can you tell me a little bit about what that inverted cross means to you? And I could tell he's getting a little worked up. He's getting a little red. He's getting a little flustered. And I have another one, like a symbol of the devil that I have hanging on my neck. I wasn't lying to the guy. I sat with him, had a good conversation, but I didn't get emotional. Nor did I let myself feel that I was on the defensive. I stayed very level-headed, very neutral, with no intent at all in the conversation. I'm not trying to win the conversation. I'm not trying to convert him. I'm going to answer his questions. I'm going to be honest because the guy's asking questions and he's crashing on the couch. Why not? And he was respectful about it. He wasn't shouting in front of my face. I could see it's uncomfortable, but that's normal because if you've been in this path for years, think back when you first started. How easy was it for you? Because I know many people on this path that are still struggling. So, I mean, to a certain extent, understand that this is a jagged pill for a lot of people to swallow. And it takes years, many times, for some people to deprogram all that cognitive dissonance that they were brainwashed with when they were first born into a religious family. So, I mean, there is a process that occurs. He said to me, you know, Cygnus, I don't understand, but I know you. And you are one of the most stand-up guys I know. When you say something, you mean it, and you mean what you say. So I got no problem with you. And I said, well, then you're welcome here, my friend. And we broke bread, and the conversation continued on to other things. And that's how that happened.
I think that's great, Cygnus. Really great thoughts. Aleister, how about for you? What are your general practices for the inquisitive neighbor?
Well, obviously, being inquisitive is handled a little differently than nosy. I always choose the reserved and measured approach. I've found that over time that has always worked best for me. My occult library is in another room that people do not go into. And then my temple is adjacent to that, my personal temple. And so someone is not going to drop by and see a lot of decoration or anything like that. It's just my personal feeling that I like a lot of African stuff, a lot of African masks and things like that from the Zulu. But that really never comes up. But I guess if it did, I would be very reserved, very measured in my approach, probably some short, direct answers, and then assess the response from the person. I obviously would not reveal too much. Again, I come from a different time. I guess the dynamics of living through that era plays a big part. I found it to be something that I play very close to the vest. And early on, I tried the open and honest approach right up front. As Sig said, you know, people would run to their car. And also, a lot of people would say, well, you know, you need to be truthful with yourself. You need to come clean. You need to, you know, be very direct. And I respect that for certain people. But again, I come from a different time when there were wolves in sheep's clothing. You had to be very careful because someone would play you into a conversation like that and then stick a knife in you or, you know, follow you home and burn your house down or what have you. So I think, again, one of the cornerstones is the discernment of the spirit, and that is done through consultation with Sathanas.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you just said led me to think about this, and I'd love both of your thoughts on it. You know, we don't have any obligation to be truthful about our walk with anyone who asks us or anyone who is nosy about that. I think Satan himself shows the example of being in the mist. He is keeping himself hidden for a time and a place and for certain people who are his sons and daughters. What about that? Do we have an obligation to tell the truth to everybody who asks us? Are we a Satanist?
No, absolutely not. There is no obligation whatsoever, in my opinion. You know, our walk is different than established religion. So we don't evangelize. We're not charged with bringing people to the truth. This is a journey that often is very solitary. It's something between Sathanas and the individual that is very personal. And you can provide secular ideas and thoughts and things like that, but there's no obligation whatsoever to reveal your hand. And I think that's just natural in life. Let's say you have a fetish. On your first date, you don't just throw that on the person. They're not prepared for that. So it takes some foundation. It takes building the relationship a little bit, not too far down the road again, where it's basically a wasted time for both people. But to Sig's point, being able to get it out sometime early in the relationship, but probably the first date or the first time that you invite people over to your house for dinner, that's probably not the best time to throw a fetish on them. And the same can be said for theistic Satanism as well.
That's great. Sig, any thoughts there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Magus is on point, and we're not obligated to proselytize or to preach the word. That goes against our credos. This is a tradition, if I'm going to use metaphorical or descriptive terms, like a tradition of the night. We operate when people are sleeping. We are the occult. We are what they don't know of. We move in the shadows. This is a hidden tradition for the hidden priesthood, for the hidden elect. And to find this path, we have to separate and part from the herd. There are certain tough decisions you're going to have to make, and perhaps some relationships you're going to lose, but that is part of the path of satanic individuation. Step into your call, your walk with Sathanas. And I ask Sathanas to bless each and every one of you with the gift of wisdom and discernment for the listeners here today, so that you may discern when it is in your best interest to make those decisions. There are times, though, where it's best just to be like a serpent and slither in the darkness, of the garden, and just, we're not here seeking to control anyone. We're not here seeking to change anyone. We don't hurt anyone. We're just here to walk our path and to develop that personal relationship with Sathanas. So whatever that means to you, and may Sathanas bless you and reveal to you what's best for you.
Thanks, Sig. So, Aleister, why don't we let you take the lead on the next situation, situation 3. You've got a novice. They've come to you for some guidance, but you can tell in the initial discussion they're not a theistic Satanist. In fact, they may be expressing satanic atheism. What's our obligation to convince them of the right path here? How would you handle that?
We have no obligation whatsoever. If a person wants to discuss belief systems, or they want to debate, or they're just interested in what your beliefs are, then obviously there are ways of addressing that. But again, I always play that very close to the vest. There is really no reason whatsoever to reveal everything about yourself and your belief. That's personal. So we have no obligation whatsoever with that. Sometimes people will ask for legitimate reasons. Sometimes they're searching. And so what I do is I give a little information that is very generalized and see how the person reacts to that before I go any further. And if they react with anything that I find to be alarming, then at that point in time, I've pretty much made my mind up. That's going to be the end of that subject. We can move on to something else.
You spoke to this a few minutes ago, but I want to just quickly follow up, and then we'll go to Sig. What about Exeans? So do we try to convert Christians? Weave into that. Do you believe in proselytizing others for conversion to Satanism?
No, we do not take part in that. That is absolutely, as you say, that is the right-hand path. We do not try to convert Christians. We do not and should not approach evangelizing or sharing our knowledge with anyone who, number one, does not have an interest in it. Number two, is not seeking entry into the path, because again, that is their concept of established religion, that they have to recruit. They have to convert. You know, what's interesting is after they have so-called converted you, then, they begin indoctrinating you. And the reason for that is just basically because established religion is a control mechanism, and it's brainwashing to some extent. There's a lot of guilt and control mechanisms that are built in to that. And the whole thing really relies on peer pressure for conformance. And we're the exact opposite. We believe in thinking, free thought. We believe in opening our mind to new experiences, new concepts. And we also believe that there are some forces out there and some groups that are out there that would love to hurt us in some capacity, whether in the social sphere or physically. So, no, we don't have to try to convert Christians. In fact, we should not.
Yeah, thanks for that. Great answer as always. Sid, give us your wisdom here, please.
Father Mal, that's a good question. Immediately in regards to converting or recruiting or anything like that, absolutely not. I'm completely aligned with everything that Magus Aleister said. As I see it in our tradition, this goes against our credos to convert, to recruit, to proselytize. In fact, personally, I believe that if a seeker approaches an elder of this tradition, typically the response might be to gently redirect the individual away. This serves twofold, because it serves also to see if the individual is truly motivated, they truly feel that they're being called towards this path. And usually if they are, they'll come back a second or a third time. So this demonstrates persistence, this demonstrates motivation, this demonstrates at the very least that they're asking those right questions for themselves if this is something they really want to further explore. So I typically tend to do that. And then if their first, respect is very important. I think the integrity of a person's word is very important. So if they ask a question, I will answer them. But typically speaking, no, we don't do any of those things. I think those are herd behaviors that as the left-hand path walker of this tradition, we don't want to replicate. This is a tradition that also might not be for everyone. It's not a path for everyone. I would say requires someone that wants and willing and able to use critical thinking. We don't do blind faith. Blind faith, we know what that is. That's not us. If anything, we're very informed about what we do. Requires study, requires research. So that does require a certain level of cognitive processing and an ability there. So in other words, this path is not for everyone. It's for people that want to know what they believe in, are willing to do the work to be very informed of what they believe in, and to apply that in their everyday life. So this is not a 1 week thing where I go on a drive-through and get some fast food and I go, as what some religious institutions, that's how they operate to a certain extent. People are just blindly asleep all week and they go over their little check-in, they pick up their fast food, and then they go. This is a tradition that encourages self-reliance for people to really implement a new lifestyle, a new way of being with Lord Sathanas, that it just embeds them, infuses them with a whole way of looking at things. So to proselytize, to recruit, to convert, just really works contrary to really what we're about. And so absolutely not. So if I do get a seeker, those are the things I'm really looking for. And I'm really trying to serve as a mirror for the individual. I am not here to tell them what I think. I'm not here to say that this is the way. My job is to guide them. My job is to serve as a blackened mirror, like a scrying mirror, so that they could see their truth. So I put my ego aside. I generally really want to look for the person's best interest. I've had individuals come, asking questions, and I said, listen, why don't you just go down to the Buddhist temple? I think you'll be better off there. Or, I think and I really truly felt that. It might not be, this is not for everyone. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be. It's quite contrary. This is a VIP club. I think this is, and for the select few that are called, welcome, brothers. And this is a very special gift, I would say, that Lord Sathanas bestows to special people, a special knowledge, hence the occult.
As always, that's great. Let's go to situation 4. And Sig, I'm going to ask this question a little bit differently because we've covered some of these topics already in what we've talked about tonight. So let's go to you next. So you have a person, they've reached out to you for some advice. They can tell you're a spiritual person, as most satanic priests are or most Satanists are, but they're seeking your wisdom and direction. What type of obligation and responsibility are you obligated to let them know that wisdom is coming from Satan?
Number one, the session, for example, this interaction that they're coming to receive guidance for is not about me. It's about them. So any information I share really comes down to the question, is this in their best interest? It should not be, in my best interest. And really, if I'm there to serve as a guide, I am there to propose the right Socratic questions for them, because this is about them, not about me. Now, should they ask me clearly and directly, I usually will stray away from that because that's not what we're there for. I didn't ask to make an appointment with him or her to tell them my beliefs. In fact, I have no desire to. And many times people come and they ask me questions like, come on, so tell me. And I look at them and I say, tell you what? Well, tell me what you believe in. And I look at them and I say, I have no desire to. Well, tell me something. Tell me some secret. And I'm like, well, do you have a question? And they say no. And I don't really have an answer. So you really have to come to me informed, I believe, with the right question. This demonstrates critical thinking, motivation, that you're really doing diligently the work and you're honest and sincere about looking for answers. Now, if you come to me for guidance, I'm not going to talk about me. I'm going to serve as a scrying mirror for you, because this is what you're asking me to do. Now, should the moment end and they say, wow, I'm really feeling very moved and I'm feeling like inspired and I'm getting thoughts and of exploring further the left-hand path, is that what you do? Because I'm feeling, and then of course, if it's purposeful and meaningful, perhaps I'll leave a seed of some validation as to what they're speaking to, but I'm not there for me, and I don't think it's important, because I can serve as a minister, so to speak, in my everyday life. I'm a satanic priest 24/7. This is not Halloween for me. This is not playing on costumes or Dungeons and Dragons. You can move magic and energy in many shapes and forms. Master Sathanas, he's a shapeshifter to a certain extent. He's also known as the man of a million faces, the serpent of a million faces, of a million names. I cannot limit him, nor am I going to limit myself in how I interact. And should it be appropriate, then I'll share. But that's up to me to decide. No one's going to force me into a corner to say anything I don't want to consciously say.
Thanks, Sig, for that. Aleister, would you handle the situation any differently?
I think what Cygnus said is spot on. I think that the way that a person asks questions signifies how involved they are and how much work they've done to get to this place. And I think that's really important. It's about self-discovery, and ultimately this path is a solitary path. And you can get information from different sources, but no one can tell you what works 100% of the time. If they tell you that, then you should run the opposite way, because that's absolutely does not exist. But I think if in the discussion and the questioning, I feel that the person has truly invested some time and energy in this, and they're really applying critical thought, then I would evaluate how much deeper I would go with the subject matter. I get questions all the time, and they're usually, how do I join the Illuminati? How do I sell my soul for money? How do I conjure a demon? Just basic bullshit questions. And you know that that person has not invested more than 2 seconds of thought in what they're asking. And so, again, I think that's a good rule of thumb for knowing if a person is really investing themselves or if they're just coming to you to either get some free information and just some quick answers, and then they can go and conjure a demon and join the Illuminati or some bullshit like that.
Yeah, I think what you said has a great deal of value. And thank you, my brother, as always. Aleister, let me ask you also to take the lead on situation number 5. I think you've been in this situation before. You've been asked by a satanic brother or sister for specific knowledge that you just feel they are not ready for, but you don't want to lose their desire to learn. How do you handle responding to that request?
I always gauge how much to divulge. And the best way to do that is really what Cygnus mentioned earlier about the Socratic method. So the Socratic method is used in teaching law because no one can sit down and just read a body of law and then learn how to interpret it and then learn how to apply it. You have to be able to think about what's there and formulate a quick interpretation of it. So using that line of questioning, which that's exactly what it is, asking certain open-ended questions that allows the person to have a conversation with you instead of you talking to the person. I find that works the best. And you can sometimes lead that person to self-discovery of some concepts that make things make sense, and they arrive at the answer that is right for them by applying the same body of knowledge as we talked about with law, but you're applying other concepts and allowing them to see what's right for them. And I think that is a wonderful way that has served me well over the years. And just ask those questions and let the person lead the conversation with their responses. Allow the person to elaborate on specific ideas, and ultimately you lead them to some kind of self-enlightenment where they have learned something about themselves, as opposed to you providing things in a checklist type fashion. Okay, do you do this? Have you done this? Well, what about this? What about this? Or just divulging information that may or may not be applicable to their life. Remember, each one of these journeys is very individual, and so there's not one size fits all. And the fact that the knowledge and the relationship and all these different things have to be molded around the person, and the person has to discover what's right for them, plays a real big part in the entire self-enlightenment process.
Yeah, I think that's great. And as you like to say, spot on. So, Sig, how about for you? What are your thoughts here?
Magus mentioned some key words there, self-realization. And I personally do enjoy working uniquely with each individual because the unique personal relationship with Sathanas is the most meaningful, powerful part of everyone's own walk with him. And so this is very important. So I take each encounter very uniquely. I don't have a cookie cut response. I value there is a curriculum, there is a degree formation process. There are the occultists in the past have spoken to this, like Aleister Crowley, and as to the theoretical development that goes on as the person enters as a neophyte and as they ascend, or rather in this context, descend. And so, yes, there is a knowledge base there, and there is a curriculum of sort, theoretically, so to speak, according to the occult literature that's out there. However, then there is the unique encounter between the individual with Sathanas directly, which I value in our tradition is very important. So taking time for the individual and to work with them to answer their questions. A key component is obviously working in your grimoire. Having a dream diary is very good. And even if you walk around with a notepad in your back pocket as you receive insights or thoughts or reflections throughout the day. So I typically begin with one assignment, and the individual has to have some level of introspection, some level of self-reflection. And so my responsibility in this capacity to be of service to Lord Sathanas is to empower Sathanas's blessing in the individual, building upon their strengths. We all have gifts, and Sathanas amplifies each and every one of our gifts. And so my job is to amplify the work that Sathanas is having in that individual's life. And their job also is to come to that place where they recognize and see that, and also magnify that through their magical workings and own self-transformation. So as a blackened mirror that's serving to pose the right questions and exercises for the individual, it's my responsibility also not to give too much or not to give too little. In other words, there is a fine balance of preparing the individual, I think, appropriately. These are forces that need to be respected and understood, and operations that you should study thoroughly and so forth. There are cognitive processes the individual needs to work through, like their own fears and things of that nature. They need to be ready to commit, and there's a certain level of full submission that's being asked of us as we in our devotion with Lord Sathanas as theistic practitioners. So it's and my job is also to help the practitioner push the paradigm of their comfort, because if you don't push the paradigm, sometimes there is no growth. So, and that's also important for you, each and every one of us, to look at ourselves, to challenge ourselves, to grow, never to grow complacent. I think stasis or complacency is a peril that being human that we sometimes fall into because we're creatures of habit. But we in the occult working, you have to keep the creative juices flowing. And if you're losing those creative juices, you got to do something to get that back. It's kind of like a writer's block. If you've ever had that, for those that are writers, it's important to be inspired, and in our case, satanically inspired. So it's a fine process, but I certainly would discern that with the wisdom from Sathanas, and he ultimately decides. In this path, I always come to him first, and he confirms yay or nay if this individual is being called. And I typically leave that between them two, and I do my best to discern adequately through the fine arts of divination and so forth to confirm that. But there's a confirmation that occurs to confirm that the individual is authentically being called. There's a self-realization of a confirmation that occurs of the individual truly believing that they're being called. And then there is the Blacken's method of guiding the individual, which allows them to peer into this blackened mirror to see what comes forth from their own meaning in Sathanas. And that's an intricate process and a beautiful one. And I'm always humbly and grateful to participate in that, because I am at service to my master. And that's all I am, is a servant to the Father. And so I am happy to be of service. Here I am, and I say to my Father, use me. And so when folks cross my path, usually it goes along with serendipities, synchronicities, dreams, and then things that align for them. And it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, and it's an honor. And I'm very grateful to be of service.
Hey, Sig, thanks. Great response as always. And you always bring into the lessons that you give us with even more than we ask for, which you bring in thoughts that I had not even had when we were initially working on the questions. So thanks for always inserting your wisdom there. So if you're just joining us, this is Night Sessions coming to you from Studio 3B, and we're talking about sharing Satan versus being occult. We are breaking for this brief commercial. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
This is Aleister Nacht telling you about a new benefit for my Patreons. I am holding live hangout events exclusively for my Patreons at all tier levels. So it doesn't really matter what tier you sign up for, you'll be invited to these live hangouts where we can discuss any topic, every topic, and you can ask questions along with meeting some really great people that belong to my Patreon. Come over to patreon.com/Satanism. That's patreon.com/Satanism. I hope to see you at the next live event. Ave Sathanas.
Hi, this is Malport Vlad Draco. We just celebrated Pride Month, and we want to recognize all of our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ community who are listening in. As a proud gay man, I'm aware of a segment of our community that uses Satan's name to increase their release recreationally. You're doing a formal ritual, and many of you may not even know what that means. If this defines you, let me tell you that you are only at the gates of Babylon, and you are not arrived yet where the real joy begins. Enjoy yourself because he does magnify those feelings, but open the door. Pick a time when you're not playing to speak his name and call on him. Pray and talk to him. Put his image in your mind, even during routine things, and say his name. And say that you desire a connection and a relationship. If you've already done that, then great. If you haven't, look around next time you're playing and see the gates up on that hill. They're within your reach. He's there. Don't you want to be too? Thanks for listening. If you're just joining us, I'm your co-host, Malport Draco in Studio 3B, and this is Night Sessions. With me is Magus Aleister Nacht and Magus Cygnus Atratus. This evening, we're talking about Sathanas, when to reveal and when to remain occult. Cygnus, talk to me about your preparation for sharing. Do you pray? Do you just listen to someone who's stepped forth or come forth seeking counsel? Do you do anything to look for certain signs that communicate, hey, it's okay to open up?
Well, for me, the precept of silence is very important in my everyday life, and I'm okay with the precept of silence. In fact, I find that there's a lot of power in silence, and like going back to what Magus Aleister mentioned earlier, there's more and less. So when it comes to really sharing my own path, in the everyday life, I don't really do that too much, in the sense of really going into detail theoretically as to the wording and the verbiage. But everything I do and move is authentically to who I am. So there's no conflict within me as an individual. And wherever I am, I still move magic or energy. And sometimes people will ask you, they'll say, oh, well, there's something different about you. But they won't know because maybe they're not aware, but they unconsciously many times sometimes pick up things on you. Or they'll ask me different questions. Oh, what does that mean if they see one of my pendants? And I typically will speak to the positive aspects of what I do. I think that's always a great way, or to the psychological benefits of what I do. So like, for example, to give you an example, if someone says, oh, I see the pendant, or I see that symbol of Satan. Isn't that evil? I will say, well, no, I can understand what you mean, but actually it's a symbol of self-empowerment. And it speaks about really just, living your truth and stepping into your power. Oh, really? I thought it meant something. Well, maybe for some people, but not for me. Oh, okay, that's cool. So there's ways to kind of go about and talking to people where you're not lying to yourself, but you're speaking to, more, big concepts that resonates to everybody, like freedom, like personal power, like stepping into your strength, like wisdom. I don't have to say satanic wisdom, because the word Satan tends to trigger people, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're afraid. But then you can just see wisdom. I mean, you're not necessarily lying. You're just maneuvering your life in a way that's most convenient for you without headaches that are just not necessary. So, be selective with what words you say. You don't have to give them the whole book. You don't have to be overly transparent because you feel the need to be, because that's you feeling honest about your path, and Lord Sathanas wants you to be honest. And so you're overly transparent, and before you know it, you're just telling to them, speaking too much, and they're just kind of looking at you, and they lost you about 5 minutes ago. So, because most of the time, you're not going to change anybody's mind. They're not going to come around to your side. You're not here to convert them. They have their own beliefs, and that's it. And I've literally been very forward with some people where they've been very direct with me. And what do you think about? Well, tell me about this. And I look at them and I say, can we talk about something else? I don't talk about politics or religion. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I find that it's not a healthy topic of conversation. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. And they usually quick, change the subject. So sometimes you got to put your foot down, and that's sometimes how I am. Can we talk about something else? Sorry, buddy. I don't talk about politics or religion. And they're like, okay. So, like they say, keep politics, religion out of the workplace, so to speak. You go do your job, and when you're home, revel. And enjoy that in the darkness of the night, in the witching hours when everyone is sleeping. It's a beautiful tradition. It's empowering and it's healthy, and it can be very empowering for your life. And there's lots of love and there's lots of compassion. And so it's a very positive path for those that want it to be positive.
Thanks, Lee. Aleister, anything to add here?
I would say always consult Sathanas. If you have the opportunity to do it beforehand, he will not lead you wrong, and you'll usually arrive at the right conclusion. Also, something that plays a big part in my life is synchronicity. That is something that really provides affirmation in certain ways and certain aspects, that I'm doing the right thing or saying the right thing, or I need to say more. It almost comes as a gnosis in effect, but that's a big part as well. It's his way of putting subtle clues out there that you have to look for, and sometimes you have to wait for the gnosis to reveal what the message actually is. But that would be the only thing that I could add.
Yeah, I think the only thing, I think that's a great observation. I think the only thing that I would add is this. Once you've gone through the discernment, and once you've gone through the making sure that you're safe and that person's safe and they're ready to hear what you have to say, take the professor hat off and speak from the heart. If you'll tell the truth about Sathanas from the heart, that has a greater impact than any book-found wisdom that you can communicate. Speak from experience, speak from knowledge, obviously, but speak from the heart, and let the heart and let Sathanas carry the pattern and the pace of the conversation. Beyond that, you're forcing yourself into providing a wisdom or a knowledge part that person may not be ready for, and it may come across as very stilted and very unprepared. And I would say stick with what you know and stick with what that wisdom is that Satan's put in your heart. And if you do that and you let him be the guide and direct the pace, it'll be successful.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely beautiful.
So, gentlemen, let's go ahead. Thank you for that from both of you. And let's go ahead and move into our final question. And it's focused on creating a laundry list for our listeners. And what I want to get out of this is creating a best practices for keeping our fellow Satanists safe moving forward. And Aleister, we're going to go to you first. What's your laundry list of best practices?
Well, I would say the first is always take precautions. Always be aware of your surroundings. Always be aware of the situation or the predicament that you're getting into. Know when to abandon a conversation. Just as Cygnus was saying, sometimes It's just better you get that feeling that this is not going to go well. And so you kind of, you punch out of the subject matter and just tell the person that you don't discuss religion or politics or what have you. Nothing wrong with that. You are not obligated to engage in any capacity. Listen and, more importantly, observe their actions and their reactions to what you're saying. A lot of times, a person's body language will say a lot more than their words will. Next, remaining in the shadows has served me well for decades. I'm a big advocate of that. Again, I experienced a different time in the left-hand path. And for that reason, I always remain just a bit in the shadows. Know what you want to reveal. Know what you should reveal, and maybe over time you allow yourself to reveal more. However, always bear in mind that anything that you say may be used against you in the future. Everything that you speak is going to be out there. You can't take something back. I don't care if you say, I'll take that back. It's already there. So think that through, and always remember, discretion is the better part of valor. So knowing that, and knowing that you can't unring a bell and you can't take words back, is very important, and conduct yourself accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's great food for wisdom. So how about for you?
Wonderfully said, Magus Aleister. Thank you. Yes, indeed, words of wisdom. Well, one thing I do like is remaining in the shadows. This is a night, a tradition of the night. And so there's a sense of many things that go along with that we have to come to terms with, to accept. And for one, I'm accepting that it will be inevitable to some degree or another, a certain level of conflict. In this respect, accept that. We hope to mitigate it. We hope to minimize it. However, if it does happen, don't take the victim perspective of why me, and there we go again, I'm the scapegoat, and because maybe, and you get angered, you get reactionary, and then before you know it, it just escalates and whatnot. Stay calm, stay composed. Look at the scenario with the eyes of Satan, with the eyes of Lucifer. Look at it from a bird's eye perspective. It's step back, connect to your Father, say a prayer, and gaze. Try to remain uninvolved and undetached, unattached to what's going on here, so that you're not triggered or listening. You're not being part of the problem, but just watch and stay calm and listen. Like Magus was saying, watch the body language, see what are they really saying or not saying. Analyze the situation. And many times when situations kind of get out of control and with communication and conflict, you're no longer even listening to each other. People are just screaming to see who can scream louder. And oftentimes I find that we're talking about the same thing, but we're using different words, and people are getting caught up on the words and not really listening to what I'm trying to say. And that's what ends up happening. You're not listening to what I'm trying to say, right? So it's always good to try to, to validate if a person's coming at you. Hey, I understand you might be feeling this way, but just remain calm, you analyze, and you stay cool. And but remember that also silence, for me, is one of the key precepts of the adept. Early when you enter the tradition, and you learn this also in the higher degrees, silence. It is always will be and will continue to be. And in your silence is power. And this not only informs how you relate to the world, but in your magical operations. Silence is power.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said, Sagan. And kind of to add on to that, when you're coming into this, particularly for the first time, and you're exploring, you're going to come across a lot of websites that are and will purport to be about Sathanas, but they are of little value and of little worth. And some of them can be outright dangerous in terms of what they purport to believe and purport to support. I would say travel slowly. This is not a sprint. It is a marathon. There is nothing that you're going to be able to do overnight in the body of Satanism. There is nothing that is going to make you an expert overnight. Travel slowly. Sig talked about talking less or speaking less or being silent. You go on to one of these groups and there's a group participation on a website, go attend, but don't say anything. You're not obligated to say a word. You can sit back, listen, evaluate, judge, measure. The second thing I would say is that once you do get some knowledge and you do build profiles or build experience with people and experience in your walk with Sathanas, and you're beginning to see your journey forward and you're receiving the gnosis, it is okay to shut down and to cut off negative people. It is okay to shut down negative energy. Negative energy takes energy away, and you should be about building energy and giving energy to Satan. And so if you've got a negative person that is belittling, rude, purposely getting into your space and messing with your journey, it's okay to cut them off. And you may lose some friends over that, but that's all right. It's not about you having to put up with negative or bad behavior. And so feel free to go forward boldly, creating the situations and creating the environment around you that protects you and keeps you whole. There's enough to keep you out of the head game as you move along in terms of challenges of getting through the satanic journey and walk, that you don't need that extra time spent on nothingness. So as we move on, finally, gentlemen, from both of you, what's the most important message from him that you want to send our listeners tonight that may be gnosis for many about our worship of Satan? And Sig, let's go to you first, and then we'll go to Aleister.
For me, I would say love. Have love in your devotion before Lord Sathanas, and be sincere. And when you're respectful, let the sincerity and let the love inform the respect as you approach him in your devotion, and do what feels natural and comfortable and meaningful for you. You don't have to and deal with toxicity in your life and negativity. You don't have to suffer needlessly. Don't feel guilty if you have to make certain decisions to cultivate a sanctum, a personal temple that you can nurture and cultivate in your home, in your space, that is aligned with your heart. So approach the altar of Sathanas with love in your devotion. Keep it simple and just focus on the love that you have and offer that up and speak words from your heart. And still your mind and begin to learn to listen to his guidance that slithers in the silence of your heart.
That's great. Aleister, how about from you?
I would say a word of caution. Many people claim to be experienced about the left-hand path. Social media is full of con artists selling poison. Proceed with caution when you're engaging individuals and groups, and know that if you observe people for long enough, their true nature will be revealed. And never forget to consult with Sathanas for discernment. He is there and he will not steer you wrong.
Aleister, that was beautiful. So for me, I guess I would reiterate the point on our commercial interlude, and that's this. I've got plenty of gay brothers and sisters out there. If you're taking the short path and just enjoying his energy and how that makes you feel, that's a gateway. It's a starting point. But it's just exactly that. It's a starting point. You're missing something that is bigger and more significant and will actually, in the long run, bring you a great value and great emotional and spiritual healing. But you can easily short-circuit it. And short-circuiting it actually is dangerous to you in the long run. Go beyond that. Open the gates of Babylon. Find the pattern. It's easy to have that conversation with him. And you just have to put the time and the effort to doing it. But you know what? You'll be glad you did. Don't ever forget that. You'll be glad you did. Gentlemen, that's a wrap. Thank you both for being here and for what you do in your service to him. To our studio audience, this has been Night Sessions. We'll be back with you in August. Watch for announcements. Until then, on behalf of my co-host, pleasant dreams and hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
The luminous children of the devil revel in the tantric ecstasy of our infernal and holy lord, the Beast King Rexatianus, continue ecstatic in his devilishly seductive ways, savor the essence, consume and devour, revel and celebrate in the ecstasy of thy infernal lord, a blissful encounter of pure satanic joy. All these